My Dad, My Story.
I never thought I'd be here for my dad, or at least not anytime soon. My dad is a healthy man. He runs every day, and he eats a good meal. He has never talked bad about someone, and has never wanted bad to happen to another person. My dad is only 40 years old, yet he is in a hospital bed, and no one can figure out why. All I know is why my mother and I are sitting here right now. This started about 2 weeks ago. He came back from running with a headache. He spent the next week like that, and even went to dinner at my boyfriend's aunt's house with a killer headache. It got worse about 5 days before his seizure. He was in bed all the time, and didn't want to wake up. He didn't even want the light turned on. He started vomiting 2 days before, and that's when we went to the emergency room. They did tests, yet he basically left the same way he came, with a headache at 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. I believe that if the ER night doctor would have taken more time to look after him, even 10 minutes, she would have seen the inflammation on the right side of his brain. Yet we went home. The day of the seizure I heard the cries of my mother and I thought, something's wrong, and I rushed to the room to see my dad already on the floor convulsing. I got so nervous that my insides started shaking and my first reaction was to scream, "Did you call 911?" I ran downstairs to see my cousin and told her that my dad had a seizure. I couldn't move, because I couldn't believe it, yet I made my way up the stairs with my cousin, and by the time we reached the room my dad lay unconscious. The paramedics came about 10 minutes later, and that's when my dad started to come to. He was so scared and confused that he wouldn't even let the paramedics get his blood pressure. My mom looked at him and told him that she loved him. My dad couldn't speak because his body was half numb. He tried getting up by fighting the paramedics with what little strength he had and tried to reach the closet. When he was put back into the bed, all you heard him say was, "Ay Dios mío," which means, "Oh my God, oh my God," in Spanish. He was acting and trying to speak as if he were a 10-year-old autistic child. I never thought that he would speak or walk correctly in his life again. It seemed that my mom telling him that she loved him and to call for God was the only thing that calmed him down for at least the maximum of 15 seconds. 5 more minutes passed by, or maybe even 10. I turned to the head paramedic and said, "He doesn't know who my mom is." There were tears streaming down my face at this point, and I was so angry. I was so sad that this happened to my father. Yet, he told me that this is what happens when people seize. By the time he finished his sentence, I could hear my dad completing sentences and letting the paramedics talk to him. My dad couldn't walk well. His whole left side was numb, and so they had to help him down the stairs and into the rescue truck. My 2 cousins and I went straight to the hospital, quite a bit behind the rescue truck because we could not follow them with their lives. I went to see my dad and I never thought I would have seen him with such faces. I could see him crying, and I could see him so depressed. It broke my heart to think that my father had gone through this. and I found myself so angry that I had an attitude with the nurse when she spoke badly to my mother. At one point in time when I would re-enter the room, my dad called me over to hold his hand, and winked at me. Later on he called me over again. This is when he would confess to me things I never thought I'd hear. He said that he's so proud of me and that if he ever had the miracle in his life that I was it. He said he never regretted me, and that when I tell him I have good grades, he gets so happy inside. I cried so much. He was acting like this was his last day on earth. While confessing everything he thought of, he confessed things to my mother privately and even gave her information she did not know so she knew where things were. They took him for an MRI, and then to one with contrast. They did a spinal tap, and other different tests. My dad was put into the ICU with medication. Throughout this whole time you could see a tear fall out of the side of his eye, and he looked like he was just ripped apart. You knew that he didn't feel well just by looking at him out of the corner of your eye. He would look off into space as if trying to answer the question, should I stay here, or should I go? He would lay lifeless, sometimes staring into space, and one would get so scared. He's getting better now. No more headaches, or at least not bad ones. His first seizure was his last, and they're easing him off medications. Only his eyes hurt now. Even through all of this, one question is left unanswered. Why? Why would this happen to my dad? The healthiest man in the world, and the best man on the planet. The best dad was lying in a hospital bed in ICU. If you've never experienced traumatizing things, this stuff will really damage you, especially seeing a family member having a seizure right in front of your eyes. It will leave you scarred. I don't mean scarred in a bad way that you will end up in the same position yourself. I mean that you will look at that person and every movement that they make will make you afraid they will have another seizure. Certain faces they make will remind you of the faces they made in bed when they were coming out of their seizure. You will always be worried about how they feel, and will get on their nerves just to make sure that they are okay. These experiences change you, and especially the person who it has happened to. You are no longer worried about the big things in life, but happy about the small things. I cherish every time I see him smile, and every time he speaks. I make sure to listen twice as much, and I make sure to protect him however I can. I never leave for long period of time without telling him that I love him, and I always sit close to him so he is someone. My dad doesn't want to hear my mother, and I fight. All he really wants is to talk about everything, and reassure me every time I cry that everything is okay. He calls me over a lot so I'll hold his hand. I feel like he knows that what I'm feeling inside is killing me. I have never lost anyone close to me. I have never sat in an emergency room for anything like this before. I have never gone the day thinking, what if my dad wasn't here right now? To me this is torture. Having a question and not getting the answer as to why he is in a hospital bed. All I can turn to is God, and hope that he is up there, and hope that he listening, and hope that he is forgiving, and that he is going to help my dad get out of that hospital bed to come home. I want my dad to come home in one piece, and I want him to ask me if I want to watch movies. I want him to want to go out and spend the day outside like he used to. Nobody on earth deserves this type of torture, and I can only think that someone else somewhere else is going through this exact thing. Now I can say, I know how you feel, and even though things feel hopeless, remember that the person who is sitting in that hospital bed is the person who is reassuring you that everything will be all right.
Amazing grace.
As it was to be expected, Jesus Christ healed her dad, and 3 days after this event, he walked out of the hospital. Not even the nurses or the doctors could believe it. 4 blood clots, 1 in each side of the brain and 1 in each lung, was the result of this 2011 adventure. And to God is all the glory of this miraculous healing in Jesus Christ's name, the only God who heals, forgives and will come back soon.